What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Brought you along on a day of work with me to kind of show you some of what I do. We're working at a customer's house. We've remodeled their kitchen and redid the flooring throughout their first floor and living space. So what I'm doing today is to try to wrap up their kitchen. We're going to finish up doing the backsplash, and also something that there's not a lot of info out there on is I had to add in a pot filler for the stove. So I was going to kind of show what I did to add that in, just so maybe help somebody out there. But I was also going to just kind of set the camera up and kind of time lapse me laying the backsplash. So I'll bring you along with me and we'll get this backsplash put in for these customers. Product I'll be using to put the tile on, you can buy at Home Depot. It's called Acrylic Pro. It's basically just a acrylic mastic. It's really probably one of the easiest things to work with as far as when you're putting on a backsplash. Just if you're going to use this product, do your homework, research, look at the back as far as installation applications. You can use it on some flooring and some other stuff. Believe they do not recommend it for any type of wet applications. So we generally just use it for backsplash because it's pre-mixed and it's ready to go. But I'm going to pretty much just do a time lapse of installing the whole backsplash today, and then kind of edit it down in a time lapse fashion so that you can kind of see the backsplash going, and I'll try to address any hiccups or anything that I run into so that you can kind of see that as well. Just a few things. I'll get the camera off here. So this is where the pot filler is going to come out at. I have a stud to the left of it here, and the pot filler I believe they bought is actually a Glacier Bay, which is a Home Depot brand I didn't even know they sold. So I'll get that put on in the video and kind of show you how I plumbed it up. And this is the brick pattern that I was talking about. So you'll have another tile that's going to come back, and it's just going to be an alternating brick on thirds. I'll kind of show you. This would be just what they considered a grid pattern. The grout joints line up. I'm using 1/8 inch tile spacers. A couple of the variations of stuff that you could do for tile pattern, if you're not aware, you can go to what they call just a staggered third, where your tile will kind of stair step up. So it'll just kind of, you'll continue that pattern and you'll take a measurement for each course that you start. And I believe on these 12-inch tile, you'll have a 4-inch offset. So the tile would just kind of step in that pattern. So you can do that. You can go to just a regular brick pattern with your tile. So it would just alternate back and forth, what they consider to be just a brick pattern. Putting your grout joint in the middle of each tile. And the pattern that I was laying, like I was saying, is what's considered a third brick. So it's going to alternate back and forth just like this. So my grout joints are on a third, but then my third course will restart, and the pattern will alternate back and forth just like this. A couple other things, guys, just before I get started and kind of do the video as far as the time lapse. I told you we're using an Acrylic Pro mastic to put the tile on. Generally, for most backsplashes, if you don't have a lot of wave in the drywall or whatever the substrate is in the back splash, I generally use just a V-notch trowel. I think it's a 1/16 V-notch trowel, or no, I'm sorry, 3/16, about 5/32. You can go to a larger notch if you choose. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, the notches in the trowel, that number determines how much mastic and how much stuff you're going to, or thin set you're going to put on the wall to put the tile on and make it stick. Now sometimes where I've done plaster backsplashes, they are a little bit more uneven, and I'll use like a 1/4 inch. But generally for backsplashes, just so I don't get a lot of grout pushed up in the grout, or thin set pushed up in the grout joints, I just use a V-notch trowel. And then I just use a simple diamond break to break the tile, which you'll kind of see me go back and forth as I'm making cuts. But As far as my notch cuts around my outlets and stuff, you can use just a simple angle grinder with a diamond blade. The only time I don't really use that is if the cut's going to be shown when I have to make a notch cut. You can use a wet saw or something like that, but for most people you can get away with installing your backsplash or whatever with a simple hand brake and a diamond grinder or an angle grinder with a diamond wheel. Another thing right here, as far as when I go across the stove, what I see a lot of people do is they'll bring their towel straight across, but you can see that there's no towel behind the stove. Now on a stove that flashes up in the back, you know, it's not as much of a problem, but this being a flat back stove, what I want to do is actually make a line across my countertops and then drop down and do one towel course there. I still do that on high back stoves just because you can sometimes, depending on if it's gas or whatever, you can see down behind the back of the stove. So I like to do one tile course below the countertop. Now another thing when you're putting in your backsplash, you want to check before you get started laying your tile, I didn't say this earlier, that your countertops are good and level. If your counter company did a good job, you should have pretty level counters. Or if you're installing them, just make sure you get it fairly level. If not, it is correctable. You can you know, adjust the tile or shim the tile with your spacers as needed to make sure that you're laying a level line. Otherwise you're going to see that when you grout it. But in this case, right here I'll go ahead and show you what I'm going to do with the pot filler line, how the pot filler came. This is the first one I've installed. I've done a lot of plumbing work, but this is the first pot filler I've installed, and the reason we added it was the customer, it was kind of a commodity, but they had their refrigerator in this location initially, so when we redid the kitchen, we went ahead and utilized that wasted plumbing line that was going to be there. It was just going to get closed off in the wall, and went ahead and added in the pot filler. So that may be something you think about when you remodel as well. But to get my tile line, I just go ahead and lay my level across my two counter spaces, which I've got a pretty level surface, and I mark a line, and then you'll go ahead and measure whatever the thickness is of your tile, which mine are 3 inches, and I'm just going to add 1/8 of an inch to that, so that way I account for my grout joint, and I can make a line on either side. And then I generally get a board, just any kind of a decent straight board, and you'll put this in here down at your line, and then you can lay your tile off of that board, and then keep your straight edge going across. You don't want to try to free float the tile across the span, otherwise as your glue starts to dry out, you'll probably get some tile that starts to sag. So I generally put a board across there. So this was how the pot filler came. Like I said, it's a Glacier Bay. First one that I've installed, but I've installed quite a few. This is the bracket that they give you to install the pot filler. So whenever I roughed it in, I just stubbed my pecs out of the wall. But the way that it appears is it's double O-ringed. It goes into the back of the pot filler as such. So what I'm going to do is just use a crimp 2 PEX fitting with a short pipe nipple, and this is 1/2 inch. I'll tape and put dope on this. I'll thread it in. This will be crimped to my PEX, and I'll just leave me enough room in the wall that it's a 2x4 depth wall, so that my PEX is stuck out. So when I'm ready and the tile's done and grouted, I can shut the water off, cut the pipe, crimp it here, slide this back, and then attach it to my stud on the left side. Another good thing that a lot of people don't do before they get started, you know, tearing out or remodeling in a kitchen, is go ahead and locate your water shutoff. I can't tell you how many times that's became an issue where you get started, somebody does something, you know, or it's out of your control, or we've had dishwashers that were hard plumbed in before and they get slid out, and the next thing you know, you've got a small water leak or something. But it's just a good practice to locate your water shutoff before you get started doing anything, just so you know where it is in case there's an emergency. Now in this case, I went ahead and bled the plumbing down. That's something that a lot of homeowners don't think about. If you've got a basement, your water shutoff's in the basement, and you have an ability to turn the water on below the level that you're working on, open a faucet, and then when you come upstairs, open another faucet at your highest point. That'll bleed that water down, so that way when you open up your pipe, you don't wind up with a big mess. So that's what I've done here. I'll get a close-up, I'll cut this pipe, I'll extend it out, so that way when I get my tile all done, all I have to do is cut that pipe, crimp it to my fitting that came with the pot filler. We'll install it on the wall and continue to finish up the job. This is how the pot filler came. Now what I've done beforehand, because I left myself extra pipe stuck out for the pot filler, you want to make sure that whatever fixture you bought is going to clear underneath of the microwave or the range hood, whatever you have. So I've already kind of checked, and about here is about as close to that microwave as I want to get this pot filler. So I've made a mark as about where I want the pipe to be stubbed out at. Just something that's a good practice. You may double check that the fixture, because I was thinking I wanted to try to hold it up as high as I could, but when I double checked with the fixture, I can't put my pipe near that high because the pot filler already has an offset in it to account for getting over top of something and filling it. So as I said, I've pretty much already bled this down, so I shouldn't get any water out of it. My mark for my pipe's here so that I can crimp it. I kind of just ease into the pipe first just to make sure I'm not going to get any water out of it, and then you can go ahead and cut through it. And I'm just going to crimp a 90 onto this, which I already had a stop on it, and I'll just crimp this 90 onto it, put it back out, and then when I'm ready to do the pot filler, like I said, this is already ready to go. I can just cut it at whatever the length is that I need. So I get my crimpers, crimp this 90. And now I should be good to go. Now I do have a little bit of play up and down in the pipe, so that's going to help me out, but I still want to make sure that I maintain that spacing that I was talking about. And then, you probably saw where I just shot my leveling board across here to lay my tile. And I'll continue my pattern down below that also. So now I'm ready. I'll turn the water back on. We'll finish doing my tile work. I needed to get this stuff done so that I could continue laying in this direction. So we are headed back to the depot to get more tile because, as I think I said this morning, the tile that we got from The other Home Depot, they were out of stock on. I bought everything that they had, which was a box and a half that was left. So there's another Home Depot nearby. I'm gonna go run and pick up the rest of the towel and we'll get this wrapped up.